can't tell you how excited all the employees of Box, we call ourselves Boxers, are that all of you are here today. It's a testament to how much we want to hear your voices. We want to interact with you. We want to understand what more we can do for you with our product and with everything we do. And with that, we have an enormously exciting day. We have Marc Andreesen, Jeffrey Moore, Ted Shadler, and later this afternoon, Tony Hsieh, all fantastic speakers. We have all sorts of fabulous brands, fabulous people from companies who use Box, ready to share how they're using Box, how they have gotten users in their organizations to adopt P&G, Pandora, Pabst Blue Ribbon, one of my favorites. And with that, I'm going to do a quick housekeeping check. So we do have a wonderful mobile website, which has our agenda and a few other items, should you need to check in and you don't actually have your paper agenda. And as you're looking at your phones and typing in that, please mute them so we don't have too much jingle jangle while these speakers are up here. Obviously, we encourage tweeting, #BoxWorks. We hope to have some interesting Twitter conversations going on. And that is most of the housekeeping, and I will be back at the end of this presentation, at the end of this whole morning, helping you out. As you may have already seen, Boxers are wearing Box t-shirts. They're happy to help you if you have questions, if you need coffee, if you need to know where the bathrooms are. We're all here to make this a really extraordinary day and help you get the most out of this event. So shifting again, what you're going to hear about today is pretty consistent among all the speakers. There is a massive shift in how business is being run. Our people, our employees are demanding more from our technology. The workplace is accelerating. We need to collaborate more. We're more mobile. And we're starting to be more social and more connected than ever before. And with that in mind, our technology needs to adjust. It needs to innovate in order to meet the ever-accelerating needs of our businesses. And that's the theme that you're going to hear across all of these presenters. So with that, brings me to the beginning of our program. We have with us today Marc Andreesen. He was the co-author of Mosaic, which was the first widely used internet browser. He also was the co-founder of Netscape, and most recently is the co-founder and general partner at Andreesen-Horowitz, which has invested in many brands which you're aware of, Facebook, Twitter, Skype, and of course, most importantly and most large, Box itself. So, woohoo! Joining Marc on stage will be Whitney Tidmarsh Bouck. She is a great example of Box's growth. She comes to us with years of experience in enterprise software at Documentum, EMC, Oracle, and the like. And she will be chatting with him about innovation, technology, how the world is changing. And I'd like to welcome to the stage. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. Thrilled to have you guys here. And join me in welcoming Marc to the stage again. Very excited to have you. So we thought we'd do a little fireside-style chat, and I'm going to ask Marc a few questions so you can hear some of his wisdom and insights about the marketplace. So, Marc, let's start off talking a little bit about the tremendous shifts that have happened over time in the market. We've seen everything from mainframe to client-server, from on-premise to hosted, the emergence of mobile computing, and now, of course, cloud. So maybe you can talk a little bit about cloud and its impact on the business world. Is it bigger or smaller, the same or different than some of those earlier technology shifts we've gone through?
Yeah, so our view, and this is my involvement with cloud computing goes back a ways. My partner Ben Horowitz and I started a company called LoudCloud in 1999, which is only approximately 12 years too early. It would be a brilliant business today. If anybody wants to start it all over again, let us know. Come see us. We'll fund it. We go way back on this one. I really think cloud is the big one. I really think cloud is the big one. Cloud is the architectural shift, the revolution that really delivers technology very broadly, really for the first time. And you know, it's so interesting in this industry. We have gone through such big shifts from mainframe to client server to PC, and now to mobile and cloud. You know, we feel like we've been through 40, 50, 60 years of history where we've been really opening up technology to huge numbers of people. And the PC was a gigantic step forward, of course. PC took, you know, delivered technology to hundreds of millions of people for the first time ever. But it's really everything that came before is nothing compared to the scope of what's happening now. And you just kind of, you know, you see it in everyday life. And you know, the precursor for all this stuff is what's happened on the consumer internet. So you've got, you know, these services now like Facebook. Facebook just last week had their first day where they had 500 million simultaneous active users, simultaneous active registered users using their real names, using a single service at the same time, which is a level of scale.
How do you know they were using their real names?
Well, Facebook has a police force. So Facebook has the name cops who track down the miscreants and punish them by disabling their accounts. And you know, I give a lot of credit to Marc Benioff, you know, going all the way back 10 years with Salesforce.com, and you know, he's the first guy who kind of put his head up and said, you know, enterprise software should be as easy to use for workers as Amazon is for consumers.
Exactly.
And that is a huge shift. And now, you know, here we are in 2011. You know, the security issues are being addressed. You know, the companies like Box that are growing up in the cloud environment are first-class companies in every way, and now feels like a very special time.
Well, and since you mentioned Facebook, maybe that's an interesting segue to another topic. You sit on the board of Facebook, so you're kind of right smack in the middle of everything going on with the social computing world. Yeah. Maybe comment as well on the influence that more of the consumer web technologies are having on enterprise business software providers like us.
Yeah, so I think this is a huge shift in the industry that hasn't been written about enough or talked about enough, which is, you know, for basically between, you know, computer was essentially invented right during World War II, so, and brought to market shortly after World War II. So from sort of 1950, you know, to call it, you know, roughly the year 2000, across mainframes, mini computers, client server, and PCs, the innovation model in the technology industry was to build the biggest computer you possibly could to start, and then over time build smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller versions of it. Until you could eventually deliver it to the mass market. So it's kind of a trickle-down approach, right? So the first computers were bought by the military, they were bought by big insurance companies, big banks, and then it was 20 or 30 years later that normal people got access to kind of the miniaturized versions of those computers. So it's always been a business-led market where the consumer applications kind of spin off in the long run. In the last 10 years, it really feels like something fundamental has changed, which is it really feels like consumer computing is now leading the industry.
Yeah.
And it seems like the great new technology gets delivered to consumers first, and then gets adapted into the enterprise. And I think mobility, mobile phones are a great, you know, application use case of that. You know, consumers get the hottest new mobile capabilities, you know, years in advance of its adoption in the enterprise. And you know, it's really the rise of consumer mobile phones that have led to the mobile revolution in the enterprise. And the same thing with cloud computing. The idea that services like Box and Workday and Salesforce.com have been built in the image of Google and Amazon and Facebook you know, and even now, you know, Twitter. You know, that's a big change. And so I think increasingly you see the future of enterprise computing by looking at what's happening on the consumer side. I would also say this is why this is such a big shift this is such a big challenge problem for the incumbent enterprise software companies, is because this is just a completely different orientation, you know, thinking about users first.
Yeah.
And a completely different set of expectations on the part of the user than traditional enterprise computing has had literally for its entire life.
Well, and coming out of that world, I can certainly speak to that fact. And I think there's a really interesting question about, you know, kind of the innovator's dilemma starts to show its head here. And so what's your thought about those companies that have really made their mark with on-premise traditional enterprise software? Are they going to make this shift for the most part? I mean, these are the Oracles and the Microsofts of the world that, you know, clearly are well steeped in that more traditional sense of software.
Yeah, so I would say I'm a big believer. I think the clock is really ticking. I mean, I think it really is an innovator's dilemma. I think, you know, Oracle as sort of the most sort of vivid case study. You know, Oracle is basically, you know, I should start by saying I have huge respect for Oracle, and Larry Ellison is one of my idols. I wouldn't quite say role model. I'm not actually going to come at anybody with a samurai sword, and you're never that sure about Larry. But it's certainly one of my idols. So I have tremendous respect for the company that he's built and for what they do. But just objectively looking at where they are, you know, they've aggregated together basically all the old software.
Yeah.
And they've cranked up the maintenance fees, and they've cut R&D in a lot of cases. And you know, that's well and good for customers who are trapped, you know, in that model. And there are a lot of them. But you know, they have not leaned forward into this change. And I really do. I think innovator's dilemma. I think the innovator's dilemma, Clayton Christensen's theory, is one of the real core sort of theories and principles in our industry. Yeah. It applies over and over again, and it's applying here, which is, you know, the cloud services when they first got started, when Salesforce.com first got started, it looked like a toy as compared to Siebel. And then fast forward 5 years, and it's clearly the better option. And literally every company we fund, uses Salesforce.com, and nobody uses Siebel. In fact, I don't think we have a single company of 70 companies in our portfolio at our firm. I don't think we have a single company that uses any Oracle software. And that's just
Wow.
that's really profound.
That would not have been true even 5 years ago.
Not a chance. Well, 10 years ago, the joke, it wasn't even a joke, it was true, is you to start a .com, you'd go raise, $20 million of venture capital, and you'd sign over $4 or $5 million checks to, Oracle, EMC, Sun, and BEA.
Yeah.
And today, as a startup, you don't buy any of those things. And all of our startups run on Box.net, and all of our startups run on AWS, and all of our startups run on Salesforce.com, and all of our startups run on Workday, and all of our startups run on Google Docs and Gmail. And so, the change, the change has arrived. The incumbents, I think the clock is really ticking. And then I think, again, to the innovator's dilemma theory, the new companies getting built like Box.net are different kinds of companies than traditional enterprise software companies. And so the development cycle is completely different. The deployment model is completely different. The sales and marketing approach is completely different. The customer service model is completely different. And so, it's kind of like in gaming, you're seeing this sort of war right now between Electronic Arts, which makes packaged video games for consoles, and then Zynga which makes games for Facebook.
Exactly.
And they're just completely different companies when you carve them back and look inside. And I think the same thing's happening with enterprise software and now cloud.
Well, and you talked about people being sort of trapped in the world of enterprise software, and I think my applause goes out to all of you in the audience because clearly you've broken free from the chains that have fettered you of the past and invested in Box. So congratulations.
Exactly.
Obviously, with Andreessen-Horowitz, the company being a VC company, and you're investing in all sorts of interesting technologies, we're seeing, a lot of people are talking about, are we in another bubble? And very interesting article that you were interviewed for and talked a lot about software is eating the world. So I'd love for you to share some of that with the audience and talk a little bit about, are we really in a bubble? What's different about this market growth curve relative to, say, the .com/.bomb era?
Yeah. So the big thing that's different is that everything we were talking about in the 1990s is actually working now. And I can tell you from experience it wasn't working back then. So what do I mean by that? So first of all, just market size. So now, more than 2 billion people on the internet, you're going to have, that's just like 2 billion with a B people on the internet on browsers today, adding about 100 million a year. Number one. Number two, the smartphone revolution, has truly arrived. And so now you've got hundreds of millions of smartphones, which are real computers in people's pockets. And I think smartphones in the next 10 years are going to go to 5 or 6 billion worldwide. Yeah. I mean, I think especially now with Android, the revolution there is upon us. And everybody on the planet who can possibly afford one is going to want a smartphone. And so the end market is just so much larger. So at sort of Netscape's, my company Netscape's peak in 1998, 1999, we had a total of 50 million people, 50 million with an M people online. That was it, That was the complete addressable market. Probably everybody in this room, and then another 49 million of your friends, and that was it, which is just not a very big market. So market size is much, much larger, number one. Number two, the technology actually really works now. And you see this every time you load up Box.net, you see it. Every time you load up Amazon, every time you load up Google, Facebook, the technology really works, and the programming languages work, and the application servers work, and the database software works, and NoSQL works, and cloud computing works, and all these things actually work. And years ago in the .com era, it was really hard to get all this stuff to work, and it's still hard to get this stuff to work at scale, but it does fundamentally work. And then number three, the other unappreciated thing is the cost structure today is so much lower. I always tell people Facebook would not be a viable business. 10 years ago, Facebook would have been impossible to have as a company, to have as a business. The infrastructure costs would have killed it. There's just no way you could have afforded to have Facebook. You would have just been, the checks to Sun and to Oracle and BEA and EMC would have been billions and billions and billions of dollars, and it just would have crushed the business before it could have gotten off the ground. And it's the same thing for all the new cloud enterprise companies. It costs so much less to run a company like Box.net or Salesforce.com today than it would have 10 or 15 years ago, which means that you can get these amazing services like Box delivered to a very large number of people, without a gigantic, it still costs money, but not a gigantic amount of money, which means the prices, are so much lower than enterprise software used to be, which again is part of opening up the market, to a much larger number of people. And so it's just a completely different landscape. The basic economic models are completely different and so much better. And that's what we really think is misinterpreted. We think basically people who lived through the 1990s, investors and entrepreneurs and VCs and reporters, are so psychologically scarred by the bitter disappointment of the failure of a lot of the dot-coms in 99 and 2000 that it's hard to look at today's landscape and see these things that are working and not get upset. It's like, last time I thought everything was working, like the whole world turned against me and everything caved in and it felt awful. And so therefore, that must be what's about to happen today. And our response is maybe stuff is just working. Like maybe it's actually happening. And
maybe we should really believe it this
yeah,
time.
like, it seems like it's real. So,
yeah, exactly. Well, I know this is short, but I have one last question for you that I think the audience would love to hear an answer to, which is you've invested in Box. So maybe you can share with the group here what prompted you and Ben to invest in Box. What are you excited about most about our potential future? And what do you see in the future for us?
Yeah, so there really, I would say three things. So one is, we just noticed, like I said, like we see, we're at our venture firm now. We're seeing, I think, 1,500 referred qualified deals a year, companies a year coming through, and so we're just seeing this unbelievable cross section of the best and the brightest of all the new companies, and the pattern is unbelievable. Like I said, they're all running on AWS. They're all running on Salesforce.com. They're all running on Zendesk is one that comes up all the time. They're all running on Box.net. We just saw Box.net over and over and over. And we ask every company that comes in, what do you run on? And it's just, they all say Box.net. So, we don't have to be that smart at a certain point to say, well, it seems like something is going on. Number one. Number two, based on that, we got to know the company and got to know Aaron and the team. And, I think the people at this company are just marvelous. I think it's an amazing team of people. These companies really are the people who make them happen. And it's an amazing group of people, and it's an amazing group of people who simultaneously understand all of these concepts of sort of the modern consumer computing and mobile and all the sort of the consumerization aspect. They completely understand that, but they also really understand the enterprise, and they really understand enterprise requirements. They really understand enterprise sales and support and service and credibility and trust. And it's very rare to find a company and a team that really has both of those concepts, just completely under control, which is very exciting for us. And then third is we just think the runway for the company is tremendous. The service already today is, we run our firm on Box.net, so we live with it all the time. And it's a marvelous service today, but you can just see the runway, the future product roadmap and evolution that can follow from here, and how it can make people so much more productive. And so we just think there's years of innovation ahead, and the company is incredibly well set up to be able to be the innovator in the category. So,
awesome.
Good.
We think there's a great runway ahead too, so we're pretty excited. And you guys get to hear lots about that today. So thank you so much, Marc. This is great. I hope you enjoyed listening to Marc's thoughts and insights.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.